Hello once again. It's that man in the forest. And I must say some of my best thoughts come when I'm walking in the forest. And some of the best ones were in the forests of Finland, which I was very, very fortunate to walk. Great place, not many people. And if you walk in the forest, you very rarely see anybody. And if you do, and you don't want to talk, you just raise your arm and say, Let me just say that this was going to be my last rant, purely because so few people listen. And even though I've actually been used to being ignored over the years, it still has an effect. However, thanks to 2 new subscribers, thank you for subscribing, by the way, I'll carry on for the time being and see what happens. But having said that, I'm also very aware of the algorithms, fact checkers, mysteriously cancelled comments and upticks that just disappear into thin air. Now, looking at the world geographically, there are no borders apart from the sea, rivers, mountains and deserts. If you travel either north, south, west or east, people gradually become physically slightly different and maybe have unusual accents. But essentially, we're all the same. Race is very often used in arguments today as racism, but the fact remains racism is nothing more than a social construct made up by bullies who mistakenly believe they are superior. And there is only one race, and that's the human race. It's only the political borders and historical prejudices that separate us, and there are many of them, I can assure you. Taking a stroll through world history will take you on a journey of fearful conquerors like Genghis Khan, Attila the Hun, Vlad the Impaler, Mussolini, and not forgetting that man with a funny little moustache, whose name must not be mentioned on this myopic platform. And there have been many others, of course, whose reputation makes our blood run cold. The problem with history is that it's mostly written by the victors, and that implies that history is not grounded on facts, but rather on the victor's interpretation. And victors, of course, can force their narrative on people, and most certainly have done in the past. And now we have reached a point in our history where lefty intellectuals are rewriting it to suit their own agenda by once again thinking they are superior. Events over the last 3 years have totally convinced me that we have been lied to wholesale big time. So my question is, once again, has it always been so? Probably yes. Obviously, I'm not saying that any tyrant wasn't evil, but the real scary thing is that they all believed that they were right. And it's a typical trait of psychopaths and sociopaths. And the most scary thing is that the great majority of tyrants and many people at the top are exactly that and lack any sympathy or empathy. It's just alien to those people. And talking of aliens, just recently, Tony Blair, speaking at the World Economic Forum, was demanding endless vaccines and digital IDs to monitor who is compliant and who is not. Now, this is utter, complete madness from a confirmed sociopath. And he wants endless vaccines for everyone, including children, when many people in the world are calling for a halt in view of mounting injuries and potential excess mortality. Now, Tony Blair is a very dangerous man indeed. He's a snake oil salesman and the type of man that would convince you that white piano keys are being used as false teeth for cows. And he has several bridges to sell you at the same time, all the while sniggering through clenched teeth only lawyers are endowed with. What we must realise is that the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab and all his sidekicks and associates, including Tony Blair, are just historical has-beens and pose no threat at all to anyone but themselves. Any serious politician with any credibility, and there aren't many, that's for sure, would not be seen dead with this crowd of losers. The debacle in Davos in Switzerland is just another bogeyman in the cupboard dreamt up by the mysterious cabal of compliant establishment lapdogs. No doubt with the aid of the nudge units in the background, hoping for renewed power in the future. And we must never forget these people or who they were, and their names are all there to be seen on the internet. Their job is to frighten the masses, and hopefully many people are gradually and slowly waking up to their shenanigans. There has been much emphasis put on fear, that the ordinary human being has become a slave to popular culture and the propaganda spread by those who hide the truth. Now just look at the recent gleeful popularity of demonising Russia and its people. Is it warranted? Many would argue, yes, it is. But the majority of people who join in demonising the Russians have never even seen one, let alone met one. And all they've done is succumb to the false truths of popular culture. I was extremely lucky to have friends in Finland who invited me on a sailing trip around the Baltic. And at one stage we were within touching distance of Russia. And during my travels I met several Russians. And to be quite honest, all were polite and respectful. And yes, maybe a little bit different, but is that a valid reason for despising them? Take away the political border between Russia and Finland and you have the same people. Even though Karelia is still a bone of contention all these years later. People in Karelia, as in most countries, have different accents. And people in Karelia have their own dialect that is peculiar to those in the West, and vice versa. And that takes me to today's vilification of a country that is steeped in mystery and enigma. Take a glance at prejudices today, quite possibly brought about by clever manipulation throughout the years by people who fear what they can't see. Just look at the way Russia has been characterized in movies over this time. Fictitious Russian villains portrayed in movies has much bearing on this fact. We started, as far as I'm concerned, we started in the 60s with the film From Russia with Love, and Rosa Klebb. She was a KGB agent with a knife in her shoe. Then we had Dr. Strangelove, Red Dawn, Ivan Drago in Rocky IV, Loginov in Hunt for Red October, Xenia Onatop in GoldenEye, Igor Koshifenov in Air Force One, Viggo Tarasov in John Wick, Alexander Brimovich in Atomic Blonde, and General Dreykov in Black Widow. Of course, the USSR, being a closed society behind the Iron Curtain for decades, didn't help its popularity at all. and the mysterious, enigmatic country was looked upon with suspicion by the West, purely because of that. And of course, the paranoia works both ways, because I'm absolutely certain that ordinary Russians were equally wary of the West because of their own propaganda, which just takes the natural fear of strangers to a new level. Now, the American dream machine and the power it wielded has been responsible for a great deal of global influence over the years. But it seems to me the US hegemony is on the brink of just another empire collapse. And maybe that is what this world needs. America has social decay and extremely incompetent leadership. And it's to blame because there is no competent leader at the helm, just incompetent clowns with huge egos. Now, listening to many leaders from all over the world tells me that there are very, very few competent ones in power. Any capable leader with any sense takes advice from trusted colleagues with proven ability and strong diplomatic sense. And the whole world seems to be severely lacking in diplomacy. And the only one, in my humble opinion, that has any diplomacy is Mr. Lavrov, the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs, who, by the way, is currently on a diplomatic tour of South Africa and Africa in general. I'm sure they're planning for their future. He seems to be the only one talking sense, but he's run into trouble with the world pulling the anti-Semitic card, which is complete and utter nonsense considering how much Russia has suffered under Nazis in the past and the present, actually. To be called anti-Semitic in today's world only needs a mention of the word beginning with H, even though it might only be in passing. Do that and you're doomed to be excommunicated. You've only got to ask people like Jeremy Corbyn or Andrew Bridgen. Anti-Semitism is purely used as a slur to bring people down. There is a full list of victims and perpetrators, and they are all there for public scrutiny on the internet. And as I've said many times before, the internet is the last bastion of freedom. Unless, of course, someone tries to switch it off. Now, there's a radical idea. Not so radical, I think. Anyway, thank you for listening to a lone man in the forest while he's still here. Au revoir.